Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I have read a little over 80 books this year so far, and I realized the other day when I was looking over some of my stats that I have only had 6 5-star reads this year so far, and one of them was actually a reread. I've had a lot of 4, 4.25, 4.5 star, but even recently I have not had a 5-star read. So I looked over my TBR. I looked over books that I had on hold at Libby. I looked at books that I had at my house, and I tried to pick books that I predicted would be 5 stars to read for this video in hopes of finally breaking my 5-star drought and getting some 5 stars again. As I finish them, I will update this video. I've only read 2 of them so far, so as I finish the other ones, I will let you know, but hopefully by the end of this video, we have a 5-star. So cross your fingers and follow along. Growing up, I absolutely loved the Legally Blonde movie. I know, totally cliche, but it was something that I watched a lot with my mom. To this day, there are things, hello, the bend and snap, what, like, it's hard. There are things that I think shaped, especially my generation of millennials, really shaped us, and I loved it. So when I heard that there was a book coming out that kind of played on the same plot beats as Legally Blonde, I was really intrigued. I thought that The Princess Knight was going to be a 5-star read for me, and that's by Cat Jacobs. I'm not sure which. This was basically Legally Blonde if we were back in time going to night school instead of law school. It sounded like such a fun read. I actually also finished this right at the end of April, which is about the time that I had started noticing that I hadn't had any 5 stars. So I went into this one hoping to be able to break it before I even officially made this video. But it ended up only being a 4-star for me, which was a shame because it was such a fun book. So the premise of the book is you have these neighboring kingdoms, and a princess of one is supposed to be betrothed to the prince of another. They have been friends since childhood, and it's always kind of been that expectation that they were going to get married one day and kind of solidify the union between the two kingdoms. On the day that the prince is supposed to propose to Princess Clea, he actually backs out. He tells her that there is potentially some conflict brewing with another kingdom that they aren't in agreement, like a peace agreement with. And so he needs a strong queen by his side. And her kingdom is really known for throwing lavish parties, having really fancy dinners, wearing extravagant clothing, but not being super military oriented. So he tells her basically, you're too soft. I need someone who is going to be a stronger leader, and that's not you. And he leaves. She is absolutely devastated because her parents basically blame her. They're like, this is your fault. You can't secure even something as simple as a marriage. He is heading off to this prestigious knight academy with his bodyguard, Ronan. And so Clea decides that she is actually going to enroll in this knight academy as well and prove to him that she can be just as strong as any other potential queen out there, and that she really is the one for him and she's going to win him back, right? A tale as old as time. I really liked the representation in this book. It's a very queer, normal world. There are same-sex couples and it's not a big deal. There are women knights at the academy and they're not looked down upon because they are women. Women and men fight during the dueling practices of the knight academy. And so I really liked how neutral gender was in this world. Clea was really looked down upon at the academy, and I do not think it's because she was a woman. I think it's because she was woefully underprepared to be at a night school. And I understand, in Legally Blonde, she was not prepared for law school, but like even the physical demands of this night academy was so out of her depths that she didn't even know how to hold a sword when she arrived. It was a little hard at first to believe that there was any way she was going to be able to succeed, just for the simple fact that it is so physically demanding and she couldn't even pick up the sword at first. That said, for a debut novel, I really enjoyed it. It was very long. It was over 500 pages, so I feel like some of it could have been trimmed up a little bit just to make it a little bit tighter of a book, and it would have potentially been closer to a 5-star, but it was still very enjoyable to read. I don't want to give too much of the plot away. It does follow some plot beats of Legally Blonde, but then it also does stand on its own, and my understanding is there's even a sequel coming out, so that would be interesting to read. I believe it's characters we've met before, but not the main ones from this one. but I did really enjoy this. And if you liked Legally Blonde even a little bit, I highly recommend you picking this up because it was such a good time. I don't own it, but here's what it looks like, The Princess Knight. And if I can find it at a good enough price, I probably will pick it up because it's one that I think I would enjoy reading again for sure. But it was not a 5-star, so continue reading I did. The next book that I wanted to try, because I've read books from her before and really enjoyed them, and I was kind of hoping because it was a later book of hers that it would be that 5-star I was looking for. And so I tried Death Meets Cute by Jay Penner. She also wrote this, I think it's called Aidenshire, but it's the Fellowship of Bakers and Magics, Librarians and Dragons, and it's a fun little cozy fantasy series, and this is also a cozy fantasy as well. I thought that this would break my 5-star slump. I had pre-ordered this, so I actually got this at the end. I got this in April sometime, and unfortunately it was also a 4-star for me. That unfortunately is kind of the name of the game for me with books lately, is they're all for something, but they're not quite that like, oh my gosh, could be an all-time favorite for me kind of thing. But this was a really good time, and so I want to tell you about it. I'm also starting to realize that while I love cozy fantasies, it takes a certain cozy fantasy to get a full 5-star. Otherwise, they are in the 4.5 range, which there's nothing wrong with. It's just sometimes instead of reading a lot of really good books, you would love to read 1 or 2 like amazing books. For now, let's talk about Death Meets Cute. So in this book, we have 3 sisters who are witches. And we are following Iris, who is the middle sister. Her and her 2 sisters are basically wicked witches. They are villains. They are very proud of the fact that they are evil. But Iris has kind of had enough of her sisters. They are driving each other crazy. And she's like, I need a break. I want to kind of break out on my own and go make a name for myself somewhere else. So she decides she's going to leave their little coven and embark on her own adventure to Freywell. I do realize that I pitched this book wrong in my anticipated reads or in my like new releases book. I totally pitched it wrong, so I apologize if you're like, whoa, it's not her sister taking her thunder or anything like that. So she goes to Freywell. She settles into this village. We're fast forwarding kind of a year later. Her bodyguard has gone on vacation and he did not come back, and she feels like because she's this like evil witch, she needs a bodyguard. You know, with a bodyguard, people will fear her even more because her previous bodyguard was an orc, right? Cool. Luckily enough for her, she hears like a commotion outside and goes outside and finds a orc fallen in her yard who just happens to have just recently died. And she just happened to be studying some necromancy, and she's like, I bet I could bring him back. He's like, I bet I could bring him back and then he could be my bodyguard. Brilliant. Except best laid plans. She interviews his like spirit, and he sounds like a really mercenary guy, right? He comes back and he's a total cinnamon roll sweetheart, which is not what she's looking for when she's trying to present a villainous persona. The orc's name is Talon, and he loves to cook. He loves to take care of her. He cleans the house. He does the bodyguard role, but he's not scary. She has to teach him how to growl and stuff because he just is not scary as a orc anymore, and she doesn't know why. Her sisters come visit and their magic is failing, and she's realizing that maybe her magic is failing too, and that's why the resurrection spell didn't go the way it was supposed to, and he did not come back with his memories of being a mercenary. So the sisters need to figure out how to fix their magic before it becomes permanent. This really explores who your family expects you to be versus who you actually are inside, and the lengths that you're willing to go to make things right at the end of the day. There's an adorable hedgehog familiar. There is a neighbor who she thinks might be a lady of the night, but might actually be someone who can give her some really good advice on finding out who she is inside. She has a whole town who is ready to embrace her as part of the town if she's willing to let them. The one thing I do wish is that we had gotten a little more background, because I wanted more information about her mom and dad. Her dad was like this villainous guy too, but then he went good, and now the daughters don't talk to him. And so I would like a little bit more of that. I would have loved if he had come at the end and they had discussed their differences and kind of reconciled a little bit. That would have been really interesting. But I will say that I don't know if this is going to be like a trilogy or if it's going to follow each sister. I'm not sure. So I don't know if maybe we'll get those answers later if there's another book. But there were just some things we didn't really get to see a huge scope of the world or very much of how magic works in that world or how magic is seen in that world, which would have been nice to see. I felt like the conflicts were resolved fairly easily, which I understand is a cozy fantasy, but it just felt a little too easy at times for some of the conflicts. It was sweet. It was very entertaining. It was an adorable time. It is no spice. I think they kiss, but that's it. And what's cute is at the end of the book are a couple of recipes of Talon's for demon food chocolate cupcakes and chocolate buttercream. If you want to bake any of the things that Talon has created, you can if you borrow the physical book from the library. It was not the 5-star that I was looking for, but I will continue reading. I do have a few more and I am hopeful. And it was still a really amazing read, and it's definitely going to be staying on my bookshelf. So I will let you know when I read more. And until then, bye. I have read another book that I predicted to be a 5-star, and I thought that we would talk about it real quick. I do not have a physical copy of it. I borrowed it from the library, and that book is The Infinite Sadness of Small Appliances by Glenn Dixon. Yes. And this was pitched as, if you've ever watched Brave Little Toaster, it was kind of pitched as a Brave Little Toaster for adults. That's an interesting take. I can see what they're talking about because, okay, so the premise of the book is you have this older couple who live in this smart house, and their refrigerator and their clock and their Roomba and their clock, I said their clock, and like his watch, they all can talk to each other, and they actually can talk to the humans, but they generally are not allowed to interact with the humans. But the whole house is run by Watch. And he's like a smartwatch, and he makes sure that temperatures are the right ones at night and water is heated up when it's supposed to be heated up. He can prevent like the Roomba from going out of her closet. He actually can lock her in, which does happen at one point. But so we have the whole story is about this old couple and their appliances. The Roomba is new, so she is portrayed as young. They keep calling her young. The husband was a teacher for years and years and years, and so he is constantly reading books. And his wife, at the beginning, you know that she is sick. You know that she has some sort of terminal illness, and the Roomba is trying to come to terms with what's happening. And through listening to him read To Kill a Mockingbird to his wife, she decides that she wants everyone to call her Scout and that she is a she. The other machines are a little confused because they're like, well, we don't have a gender. And she was like, well, this is just how I feel, and I want to be called Scout. So for the rest of the time we're talking about it, Scout is the little Roomba, okay? Scout is very curious. She does not do things like the other appliances. She wants to interact with the humans. She wants to understand things like the beauty of music and the beauty of writing and connections. And she's just very curious in a way that none of the other appliances are. And you find out a little bit later in the story that all houses are kind of like this now. And the entire world, we're assuming is the entire world, at least the entire United States, is controlled by this one primary thing called the grid. And so it controls the cars. Everything is automated now. Flights are very regulated. You tend to not be allowed to go on any flights at all, ever in your life. Like, you can't just go like travel the world. You're not allowed to do that because of all the emissions from the airplanes. So air travel is really restricted. The things you're allowed to do in your own home, like you can't like hack your system or things like that. The whole crux of the story is the wife dies. And she dies very early on. That's not a spoiler. Like, you know she's going to die. Their estranged child comes home to kind of help clear out her stuff. And there's a whole backstory with her. But now there's only one person living in this big smart house. And the grid has slowly been tearing down like single family homes and putting up like quadplexes and things like that to smush as many humans into one tiny area as possible. And the grid is not going to let him stay in the home by himself. So it is the appliances trying to fight to save the house, kind of, because some appliances are more helpful than others. This was not a 5-star for me, although it was a very enjoyable read. This one was also a 4-star for me. It talks a lot about AI and AI taking over and kind of how our society would look if we let that happen, because it starts off with small convenient things and then it comes down to like they can turn your water and power off in your house and wait you out, and then when you leave they'll just bulldoze your house. Like in the middle of the night, the grid was able to lock all of their bedroom doors and go inside of their house and find what it was looking for and steal it and leave, and there's no repercussion because it is all powerful. So it was a very interesting take in that respect. So Brave Little Toaster, from the Roomba's perspective, I can see that. I loved Brave Little Toaster when I was a kid. And so it wasn't quite that, but it was Scout really trying to do what is best for her humans. And then there's this whole other subplot with like a neighbor. So it's a very cute story. If you want something that's very heartwarming, but also very terrifying, because it is a very cozy book about what happens when society lets AI run everything and how quickly we could become obsolete. So yeah, it was definitely an interesting read. It wasn't a 5-star, unfortunately. I haven't found a 5-star yet. Even outside of this video, I haven't had a 5-star this month. So it has been a minute since I've read. Let me see. I have read 39 books since my last 5-star. My last 5-star was Animal Farm. So I'm really hoping I have a couple more on my list that I wanted to read for this video. So I'm going to try to get to read both of those. So this video might take a little bit longer to get pushed out because just both of them are a little bit longer. I do want to get to them. So I'm going to try 2 more, I think, for this video. I think I'm going to try The Caregiver by Marcus Cleaver and Isles of Emberdark by Brandon Sanderson. I have been really enjoying Brandon Sanderson's secret projects, and this isn't a secret project, but it's also not part of the main focus of all of his Mistborn saga books. And so it looks like a lot of fun. So I'm going to read that. And hopefully one of those 2 will be a 5-star, because that would be amazing to end this video with a 5-star. But we will just have to wait and see, because I am not sure how those are going to end up. Until then, bye. Hi again. I am back with the last 2 books that I wanted to read for this video. I ended up reading The Caretaker by Marcus Cleaver. And I read Isles of the Emberdark by Brandon Sanderson. And I wanted to talk to you about them real quick so that I can get this video done. So the first one we're going to talk about is The Caretaker by Marcus Cleaver. I did not read We Used to Live Here last year. Everybody was talking about it. There were so many confusing things surrounding the story that I didn't really care to read it. But when this one got blurbed, I was like, that sounds so good. And I read it, and it was my first 5-star since March. It was so exciting. I was so glad that if I had to break a 5-star drought, that it was a book like this, because this was absolutely amazing. So we have our main character, Macy, and she is the guardian for her younger sister, Gemma. Their father passed away a few years ago, and I think she's 4 or 5 years older than Gemma. And Gemma is now 17, and they are like broke. Like living in a studio apartment that used to be a hotel and had to get their furniture off the side of the road for free and never know what they're going to eat, kind of broke. And she sees this ad on Craigslist one day for a caretaker of an elderly man for just the weekend. Her sister doesn't think that she should go to the interview, but kind of against her sister's better judgment, she decides to go. And she gets there, and the wife is like, well, actually, my husband died a few months ago, but like he has these silly little rituals that he likes to do every day, and I just need a break for the weekend. So I just want to hire someone to watch the house for the weekend, be the caretaker, and do these rituals for him, even though he's already passed away, just as a kind of way to honor her loved one, right? Gemma's like, absolutely not. Do not do this. That is crazy. But the problem is they have no money, and it's $9,000 for 3 days. $3,000 up front, and then she gets the rest of it when the weekend is up, with the potential for a bonus depending on how good of a job she does, right? So she kind of feels like she has to do it. So she shows up. There is a VHS tape that the husband has left her to watch for whomever is the caretaker of the house before she actually shows up. And she watches this video, which lists all the rites that she has to follow during the weekend To which Gemma was like, absolutely no, take the money and run. Please don't just keep her $3,000 and don't show up. And Mackenzie and Macy's like, nope, I'm gonna go. We really need the money. You don't understand. And so she goes, and just absolute mayhem ensues. It's like if you break a right, read this envelope. And then if you break another right, read this envelope. And like this is going to happen. And then this is going to happen. And then this is going to happen. And you kind of start wondering where all this is going. You know, are these rituals serving any purpose? Is it just in her, is it in the late husband's imagination and now Macy's kind of feeding into it? Or is there something more sinister going on? Are they really going to stop the apocalypse as long as they do all of these rites every day? This was so incredibly fascinating. It was so good. If you love horror, if you like creeping dread, if you like to get like totally creeped out and like want to step away from the book because then you're safe if you're not standing next to the book, this is a book for you. It was so good. And it's short. It's like less than 300 pages, I think. Hold on. Let me double check before I'm all out here lying to you. Yeah, it's less than 300 pages, but it was so good. It was so atmospheric. You felt the like spiraling of Macy. And is this in her head? Is she suffering from some sort of disorder that causes this? Or is this stuff that's actually happening? Like, you don't know. And then the ending, oh, chef's kiss. And I want to go back and read We Used to Live Here, because apparently there are little Easter eggs in this book from We Used to Live Here. And I'm like, okay, well, if all of his books, supposedly all of his books are supposed to connect a little bit tangentially like this, like they're not sequels to each other, but they all take place in the same world. And so now I want to go back and read that one, because I think the kind of wackadoo nature of that one would make more sense now that I've read this one. And so I kind of know some of the Easter eggs that are in here because I went down a huge Reddit thread after this, because I was like, whoa. So I kind of know some of the Easter eggs, but I want to go back and actually read the book now and like see them for myself. But if you love a creepy horror book, if you want to feel just like, ugh, you know what I'm saying? Like, it gives you that feeling, and it makes you question, seriously, it's like, is this in her head? Are these things actually happening? If they're actually happening, how are they happening? How is it just happening with her? Like, so good. So I flew through this. I read it in a day. So good. And I was able to talk my physical therapist. She read this over the weekend. Apparently we accidentally read it at the same time. It was so good, guys. Like, she said 6 stars. So like, so good. And like I said, it's just short, and there's like different pictures throughout the book. And what's cool is I read it with the audiobook and I did a tandem read. And so when you hit a part where it has those pictures, it actually describes the picture to you. If you want a really good horror book that is going to make you uncomfortable, but like uncomfortable in like a supernatural, creepy location, walls are closing in on you, kind of suffocating, claustrophobic kind of book, 5 stars. 5 stars. And then the last book that I read for this video was Isles of the Emberdark by Brandon Sanderson. And this was another 5 star. It's not the same kind of 5 star as The Caregiver, where it was like instant 5 star. I think objectively this one is a 5 star. I think I'm reading it at the wrong time. I just finished it today, and I don't think I'm in a fantasy mood. I think I'm very much like in a horror, creepy, wacky, zany kind of book mood. And so I know, looking at this book and reading it, I know it's a 5 star, but it wasn't as easy a 5 star, I think, as The Caregiver was, just because I think I'm reading this at the wrong time. I think maybe if I had read it in the fall or something like that, when I'm more in a fantasy mood. But this was a 5 star. I'm still counting it because this is still a really good book. It is technically a standalone in the Cosmere, but I haven't read many of the books from the Cosmere except for Trust of the Emerald Sea. And I feel like there are politics in here. There are not species, but different groups of people that you probably would be familiar with if you have read books from the Cosmere. But I do think he writes it in such a way. Maze? Hello? The other cat came in here. I do think he writes this in such a way that you don't have to read any of the other books, and I don't think you'll feel right into the closet. And I don't think that you'll feel lost reading it. But this is very much, this is fantasy, not romantasy. You probably could classify it as fantasy sci-fi, but sorry if I look different, or for a different angle. My kid's school called, so I had to answer that. But I don't know what I was saying. Sci-fi fantasy, I think, is what you can classify this best as. It's a sci-fi fantasy. So we follow basically two stories. We have the story of Dusk, Sixth, I believe his name is Sixth of the Dust, but everyone calls him Dust. And his homeworld has these birds. I forget what they called the bond, because they call it different. The people of Dusk's world call it something different than what the outside world in the Cosmere call it. But basically, they have these birds that will bond to humans, and they will give the humans part of their special attributes. Like one of his birds can show projections of his death. So, like, let's say he's coming up on something that if he falls into a pit, he could die. Like, she can show him an image of that so that he will avoid that pit. And then another bird that travels with him can make him invisible to certain things. And so they're attuned to one another. And so you have his people who have never really met the people from the sky before until like their current time, 5 years ago, because it kind of flashes forward, because this is actually originally a short story that he expounded on. And so the book one of this, I think there's 5 parts of it or whatever, but I think the first part is retelling the short story and also explaining what's happening kind of in current day. So the short story is 5 years ago, this is current day, and we're understanding how the outsiders from the Cosmere kind of came in and met Dusk's people, and how they're kind of trying to exploit them for these birds' magical properties. And it sounds like if his people give in, eventually these birds are going to be not property of the people of his world anymore. They'll actually become like almost weaponized in the galaxy, and they won't have any access to these birds anymore. And Dusk is a trapper, so he spent his whole life raising these birds, kind of really being attuned to the islands of his homeworld and all the dangers that are on this one particular island where the birds get their magical powers from. So we have Dusk, but then we also have Starling, who is, when we meet her, she is a dragon, and she is an all-white dragon. She gets her magical abilities because they live part-time as humans, part-time in their dragon form. And so at the very beginning, we meet her when she is the age that an 8-year-old would look like, but actually she's like 30 or something like that. And she changes into a dragon for her first time, and then we flash forward and she's manacled, so she cannot change into her dragon form. We don't know why. We know it's because she stood up to the elder dragons and she wouldn't conform to their way of thinking, and so she was manacled and she can't turn into her dragon form now. Hi, sweet girl. She's purring. Purring? What are you doing? Yeah? Yeah, hope y'all can hear that. She is part of this ship of the pirates, but not. We know the captain. I've met the captain of this crow in Trust of the Emerald Sea. So that was interesting. At the very beginning, they rescue this family who's stuck in the Emberdark. Crow ends up leaving because it was kind of a mutiny. In order to keep the crew safe, Starling goes to the person who owns the boat, who is an elder dragon. And she's like, hey, we found this map. It might lead to this really important thing. So if you give me time, instead of splitting us apart, I will go find it for you. And then, you'll be really rich because nobody's ever found this thing before that leads to this aviary world, right? I forget what Dusk's world is called, because they don't call things like Earth. They would call it like third planet from Orange Circle or something like that. You know what I'm saying? They're very literal in their descriptions of things, which is why his name is Sixth of the Dust. Starling embarks onto the Emberdark Sea, which is kind of like a sea in space, but not. It's very confusing. It's like a sea, but it's not water, but it's not in space, but it's not in space. It is their story of how they meet and how they are going to help each other accomplish their goals and hopefully, fight the big bad and win against the big bad is the hope when you're reading this story. Like I said, it was really good. It's hard to describe because they're starting right off the bat. There are so many moving parts. It was really fascinating. I really need to read his Cosmere books. I have Mistborn, I have Elantris. I'm just scared because then it's like this is technically book 21 of the Cosmere, even though it's a standalone. So there's a lot of books, and I'm just scared that I'm going to read the first one and love it, and then I'm going to need them all, and I don't really want to buy them all, but then you it's a whole thing. But this was really wonderful. I really enjoyed it. I liked the found family that make up the pirate crew. Starling seems to have an endless well of positivity. She always is assuming the best is going to work out, and she really wants what's best for everyone. This was such a fun book to read. It is complicated at times. It is, like I said, fantasy, so there is a lot of moving parts, but it was so fun. So if you are looking for kind of adventures on the high seas, except it's not seas, it's space, but not space. If you are wanting like deadly plants and deadly animals, watching someone struggle with his world's impending colonization and watching Starling really struggle with keeping not her morals, but keeping the parts of her that make her her and make her so wonderful and so different than the other dragons. You're watching her really struggle to keep a hold of that which makes herself her. And it's a really interesting look at the lengths people are willing to go to fight oppressors. They get into situations and you're just like, how are you going to escape this? How are the bad guys not going to win? So if that sounds interesting to you, then I highly recommend it. It was a 5-star. It wasn't as objectively easy a 5-star as this one, but again, I think it was the time that I read it in, because there's absolutely nothing wrong with this. There's no reason it shouldn't have been a 5-star easy for me, except that I'm not super in a fantasy mood right now. And so it just took me longer to realize that this is kind of what I want. And it's large. It is objectively a large book. Look at this. Look at the differences. So it says it's only 400 pages, but I think this is a different printing because I've seen some of them that are 600 pages. So it's a larger book. I think the audiobook was 16 hours, but I sped it up quite a lot. But yeah, this is the last book that I decided to read for this video. I hoped it was going to be a 5-star, and it was. I was really glad that I finally read it. And it's also just so pretty, so pretty. The only thing I was bummed about, and I was glad I was listening to the audio, is there are some pictures throughout, like this one, but it'll describe it. But then I got to a point before the start of a new chapter right here, say, and then it would describe a picture, but there is no other pictures in this book except for that one. And so I actually had to go online to find those pictures. If I hadn't been listening to it, I wouldn't have even known there were other pictures. And so actually seeing the artwork, because you can just type in Isles of the Emberdark art, and it's one of the first hits that comes up. Sometimes it shows you the size scope of things, or it shows you what you may have a hard time imagining so that you can really sink into the book. And I really love that. I just wish that all those pictures were in here somewhere. I thought maybe I was missing it, but I went through this whole thing. And like I said, the only picture that was in there was that one that I just showed you. I do wish it had the other artwork in here. I don't know if that was Kickstarter exclusive or something like that. I have no idea, but I do think it would have benefited being in the book, because if you're just reading it and you don't listen to the audio, you don't even know that those pictures are out there. And I do really feel like it lent more to the story, being able to go look at the pictures, even if I had to go online, being able to see the pictures while I was reading it. Let's recap real quick. I am doing this several days after the intro. So I'm going to do the outro with what I have on hand. So I will just pull out my handy dandy notebook and it will tell me quicker than the silly Google. I read The Princess Knight by Kat Jacobs. I don't remember which one it was. And I gave that one a 4-star. Then I read The Infinite Sadness of Small Appliances by Glenn Dixon, and I gave that one a 4-star also. I also read Death Meets Cute by Jay Penner, and this one was also a 4-star. So I only had 4s and 5s, which is absolutely amazing. I love that. And then the last two that I just talked about was The Caregiver by Marcus Cleaver and Isles of the Emberdark by Brandon Sanderson, and these were both 5 stars. So, do I know my own taste? Yes and no. I think that's my problem. The Princess Knight, Death Meets Cute, and The Infinite Sadness of Small Appliances were all more like cozy, and those are harder for me to give a full 5-star to. I don't know why, because I love cozy fantasies and cozy sci-fis and cozies, but I think it's because it gives me just that like warm feeling, and maybe that's just a warm 4-star feeling. But these for sure were 5 stars. I love that I gave another Brandon Sanderson 5 stars. I think this is the third one of his that I've read, and it's the third one that's been a 5-star. And this is my first Marcus Cleaver, but I definitely will be going back and reading We Used to Live Here because I am so intrigued now as to how they connect. That is all I have today. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope that you have an amazing rest of your day. If you aren't subscribed, then maybe, click the subscribe button. I don't know what I'm doing out here. I feel like I'm just talking into the void, and that's fine. But yeah, if you enjoyed what you're seeing, then please give it a like and maybe subscribe. But other than that, I will see you next time. Bye. I don't know who keeps calling on my home phone, but it's driving me crazy. It's still ringing. There's potentially some conflict. There's officially a tale as old as time. Ooh, so sorry. No, everything is so loud right now. Crap. I don't even remember what I gave all these books.